It's been a while and I really miss seeing all of you and having fun in church. Praying every day that we get able to be together again someday soon. But until then, we're still reading through our Bibles and we're still going through our Sunday school material through videos, and I hope that you're getting something out of this. Now, I hope you had a moment to read through your stories or to listen to it on the previous video. Today we have a lot of parables that Jesus told, which were small stories talking about the kingdom of heaven. Now, we're going to divide these stories into 3 just so we can understand a little bit better what Jesus was talking about. First of all, we have the mustard seed and the stories of the yeast in the bread. Then we talked about the hidden treasures, the treasures in the fields. And finally, there was the story of the pearl. Okay, let's get into it. So, let's start with the story of the mustard seed and the yeast in the bread. Jesus spoke about how the smallest grain of mustard seed could grow into this big tree, a massive tree where birds could build their nests. And he talked about just like the yeast that we use to make bread can help the bread grow, that is like the kingdom of God. How it began from Jesus and a few disciples and has taken over the world. Millions of people all around the world have heard of Jesus, believe in Jesus and follow Jesus. And this all started from the small mustard seed, or the small piece of yeast, and that was Jesus's earthly ministry. Sometimes I find Jesus's parables quite difficult to understand. Even as an adult, we find it that there's sometimes so many things that we don't know, we don't fully understand. But with this story, I could really understand it, because every day I go to my work and we make bread. I see how little yeast we need to create many, many loaves of bread every day. And I love to think about how that is like our experience of the kingdom of heaven growing on earth through communicating the gospel to others. Now, I wanted you to understand that in the same way that I did, so I thought maybe you could come with me quickly to see what that looks like in our kitchen. So in one of Jesus's parables, he talks about how the kingdom of God is like yeast in bread, which is why I brought you here to my workplace. This is the kitchen that I work in every day at the moment. Now, we're talking about yeast, and there are several types of yeast that we could be talking about. We could be talking about the yeast that we bake with at home, or we could be talking about living yeast, like what we would make sourdough bread out of. I have both types here, but we'll talk about the one that was made into sourdough bread, which is what they would have been making, or something similar back in Jesus' day. So this yeast is a living yeast, and we feed it with water and flour every day, and this little tub of yeast will turn into 24 loaves of bread. Do you think that's possible? That's not very much yeast. So we were talking about how the kingdom of God can grow from something as little as a mustard seed into the biggest trees, and from something as little as this yeast in the sourdough to 24 loaves. And we're talking about the kingdom of God, how it went from just being Jesus and his 12 disciples to spread throughout the earth. And there, that tiny bit of yeast has turned into 24 loaves of bread, enough to feed the family. Cold out there. So that was mustard seeds, which we found, and the yeast in the bread. Now, the other stories, parables that Jesus told, were about the hidden treasure in the field. This one's maybe a little bit harder for us to understand. I haven't found any treasures in a field. Sometimes I wish I had. But what Jesus was trying to tell us in the story about the treasure in the field, he himself is the treasure in the field. Following Christ, knowing Jesus is the treasure in the field. And the man who came upon the treasure, he recognized that treasure was worth more than anything he owned. So he went and sold everything he had to be able to buy the field, to have that treasure. It doesn't mean that we have to sell everything we have to buy Jesus. No, it means that Jesus is worth more than anything that we own. And we should feel that we can give all of that up to follow Jesus because he's worth so much more. And finally, we had the story about the pearl. The story of the pearl and the story of the hidden treasure is similar. What Jesus is trying to tell us, that there is nothing more valuable on earth than the treasure of being in a relationship with Christ, of knowing God. I want you to think a little bit, if you are somebody who likes to write things down, or somebody who likes to talk about these things with your parents or your siblings or whoever's around you, you can do that. What is the most valuable thing that you have in your life? And would you be willing to trade that if you had to follow Christ? I want you to think about what it is that could be more valuable than a relationship with God. In another part of the Bible, God says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all of these things will be added unto you." And what he means by that is that if we seek the kingdom of God, this most valuable pearl, the most valuable treasure that is growing all around us from the start of a mustard seed, from Jesus' teachings, that everything else that we could need, be it clothes or food or company, it will be given to us by God. It's not to say that it's always easy and that it'll always be the way that we want it, but if we put God first and we seek his kingdom, then everything else will come as it's meant to be. God looks after us because he loves us and just wants us to know him. Okay.